Basu Godin Notebook. 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 Basu Godin Notebook.
Are we dead? Is this heaven? No, it's not heaven. It's Montreal. Hello, Arpin.
Hello, it's not Iowa. We're not dead. We thank everyone for inquiring about our well-being. We've read all the emails, all the comments, all the tweets. So we are here today to tell you what's going to happen to the podcast this season. It's taking a different shape, a different form. Our friends at SDPN are giving us a chance to speak here on their platform. But this will be our final episode on the SDPN platform. So we want to explain to you why that is. There are good reasons for it. It has nothing to do with SDPN or our relationship with them. We would have loved to have stayed here, but circumstances outside of our control have led to a change in the podcast. We're going to quickly explain that, and then we're going to do an episode about everything that's gone on in Canadiens training camp. So let's start with the boring logistical details of what our podcast is going to be going forward this season, but we will have a podcast. It's just going to change a little bit.
Right. Yeah. So lately, obviously everybody's been noticing, the fact that the notebook has been very quiet during training camp. And why is that? Well, we're trying to come up with a solution to overcome a certain hurdle that concerns me specifically. So here's the deal. My employer is CBC Radio-Canada, and they have journalistic practices and norms that we must abide to. And among these, there is this principle that a reporter cannot be associated with a product, cannot do advertising, cannot have sponsorships, basically. And as you know, the vast majority of podcasts nowadays finance themselves with advertising. So it's the case with SDPN and all other podcast production companies. So I could only go so long in continuing this podcast without doing any advertising. It doesn't make sense for a company hosting the notebook, and it doesn't make sense either for Arpin and I. So in saying that, and I know Arpin will join me in this, I want to thank SDPN for hosting us this past season. So here's what we're going to do. The Basu Godin Notebook, hopefully by next Friday, so October 11th, will be available at basuandgodin.com. There you will have to subscribe to our podcast. We will continue to have 2 podcasts a week. The Friday episode will be available to all for free, and the Monday episode will be available to paid subscribers. So you will be able to subscribe monthly to the Basu Godin Notebook or on a yearly basis. After years of not getting a dime out of this and doing it really for the love of the game, this is how we can keep the pod going. We truly believe that the pod is worth something. And if all of you don't think that it's worth paying for it, well, it won't be able to last. And we want to make it last. Some of you might be listening or watching us on YouTube right now. So what's going to happen to YouTube? That's a good question. The Friday show, the one that's available to everybody, should be made available on YouTube, but not the Monday episode and not maybe the mini emergency episodes that we might do for our paid subscribers. So generally, the Basu Godin Notebook will go back to being a lot more of an audio product, and it will be made available wherever you get your podcasts, as they say. So check out basuandgodin.com. Leave an email address so that we're able to hook you up with our podcast, and I hope that you will help us making this a success.
Yes, I agree with everything Marc-Antoine just said. And just to further, we will be populating, we will have a YouTube channel that the Friday episode will live on. We will be putting out segments of the Monday episode, perhaps on YouTube, but we will put out segments that are available for free of the Monday episode. So however long they will be, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, we're not quite sure yet. And really, to be perfectly honest, we're still trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. So, we're
Yeah.
we're working on it. But yeah, as Marc-Antoine said, we put a lot of work into this. We put a lot of time into this. We do need to make it, somewhat worth our while, if you will, other than just the podcast living on and the audience that we've grown and the community that we've grown, we cherish so much, which is why we're going to have a free episode every week. We did not want to turn off the tap and make it that you had to pay to get the podcast. So to get both episodes, you will have to pay, but you will still get one episode per week if you're unable to pay or unwilling to pay. So this is a way for us to continue providing our thoughts on the Canadians throughout the season to as wide an audience as possible. And for those who feel they can or want to pay for the extra content, there will be extra content for you people there as well. And we're still figuring out how the YouTube channel is going to function. Our hope, I can say for now, is that the Friday episode will be there, and then we'll also have a segment of the Monday episode there as well. We're still trying to figure out the logistics of how that would work. And whether we can actually technically do it. You're not dealing with two of the more podcast savvy people other than speaking into a microphone and staring into a camera. So we're working a lot of this stuff out, but the podcast will live on in this form. And so again, huge thanks to the SDPN people for first of all, letting us do this episode as kind of the goodbye episode from their platform, but also all of last season, all the work that they did, the production help, all the support, the social media clips, everything they did to promote the show was help grow the show. So we're very much in gratitude to the people at SDPN. Unfortunately, the relationship can't continue if it weren't for this, in my mind, a highly legitimate reason. The relationship would continue. So, but our relationship with you, the listeners, hopefully will continue past this episode and into the future and into the season and into seasons to come. And if enough of you subscribe and enough of you make it so that it is a viable venture, and this is not something we're looking to get rich off of, like it's just something that, we just want to make it somewhat worth our while, but we're not looking, we're going to keep it going as long as enough of you think it's worth putting in, a little bit of money to listen every week. So, but the one thing I want to add is that we will not be turning on the paywall until probably the beginning of November. So throughout the month of October, all of our episodes will be free. So that'll be 2 episodes a week. Then at one point, and you'll get fair warning, we will flip on the paywall. One episode will be behind the paywall. The other episode will not be behind the paywall. And so even after that point, you'll still have one episode outside the paywall. So that's the solution we've come up with. And I know that, some people might have been frustrated that we weren't answering your questions on what's going on. And I know I got comments on my stories on The Athletic. We recently went into the basugodin@gmail.com email account, and saw the barrage of emails of people saying, where are you? What's going on? What's happening? I want to give a special shout out to Eric Toth.
Yes.
So Eric Toth sent an email. The subject line is guys, ... And the email is a photo of the bat signal. And in the bat signal, there's our photo from our Basu Godin Notebook kind of logo. And we are in the bat signal. And there's nothing else in the email. There's no words. It's just guys, ... in the subject heading. And then a photo of the bat signal with our pictures in the bat signal. So Eric, hopefully we saw the bat signal. We received it. It actually happened yesterday, or actually Wednesday, I should say. I think this is coming out on Friday. We're recording this on Thursday. So bat signal work, Eric. Here we are. We saw it and we're here. So this is what we've been working on all this time. And so hopefully, as Marc-Antoine mentioned, by next Friday, October 11th, we will get back to our regular schedule of a show every Friday and every Monday throughout the season and probably even after the regular season. And if the Canadiens happen to make the playoffs, obviously we would continue. But even if they don't, we will continue well into the off season as well. So that's that. Anything to add?
On to the hockey, man.
Assuming there's still people listening, we can get to the hockey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with all the people that sent us messages, I suppose that they were curious to know what was going on. So they're still there because we explained what was going on.
Yes.
So, all right. So training camp is well underway, and boy, was there a lot of action. Action on the ice, action off the ice. But let's start with Patrik Laine. This gentleman that the Canadiens acquired during the offseason. I remember we had an episode back in June discussing this possibility, and it came to fruition. But unfortunately, it was we'll have to wait to see Patrik Laine in the Canadiens uniform for real. How relieved were you that it was 2 to 3 months his absence? Because honestly, from just the optics of the contact with Cédric Paré, I think that a lot of people, and I know that Kent Hughes, I spoke to him a few days ago, earlier this week, and he said, I thought that his season would be over. So I suppose that the impression for everybody in the building or everybody who's seen hockey injuries before must have thought the same, right?
Yeah, did not look good, especially the still image of Laine's left knee bending in a way that knees just are not meant to bend. I can only imagine Kent and Jeff Gordon watching that. They recently showed the episode of the rebuild, the Crave show that they're doing, where we saw kind of Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon kind of react to Kirby Dach leaving the second game of the season last year. Here they go out and get this player that, the second shift of his first preseason game, he elicited a reaction in the Bell Center that Martin St. Louis compared to what Guy Lafleur used to get at the Forum when he just picked up the puck and started skating up ice, and this swell of anticipation. Second shift of his second preseason game, this happens. So it's I'm really happy that Patrik Laine on Thursday, speaking to reporters in Mont-Tremblant, absolved Cédric Paré of any blame in this situation. He took a lot of heat from all corners, not just fans. And I know the people who inundated his Instagram account with threats and comments and all this garbage. Like it was really an ugly side of the passion of this fan base. And really both fan bases, because they were going at it online for days after that. But former players, largely, I really thought that the most, the strongest reaction to Paré's hit came from former players who kind of were like, that's a garbage hit. You shouldn't be making a hit like that, especially not in the preseason. That's an established player. You're a plug. You're an AHL guy. You shouldn't be hitting established stars like that. So I was glad that Patrik Laine set the record straight and acknowledged that he put himself in a pretty vulnerable position that he didn't need to do, especially in the preseason. Exposing his knee that way, skating in with such a wide stride, trying to split the defense when there was no room there. I'm happy that he took some responsibility for it, not all, but I think Paré also acknowledged that he has some responsibility for what happened. But yeah, for it to be 2 to 3 months, it's strange to say that that's good news. Like he's going to miss, he'll be back after Christmas in all likelihood. I guess 2 months would be before Christmas, but I think they're going to play it safe with this. So I would not expect to see him until after the holiday period. But still means that he'll be back at some point. And, a lot of people, I saw some reaction after he got hurt, like, oh, Kent Hughes has to go get a replacement now.
No.
This just doesn't exist. Like it's just not a thing, Like these players are not just sitting around like, oh, Trevor Zegras, go get Trevor Zegras now. No, I mean the reason why they didn't get Trevor Zegras to begin with is the price for Trevor Zegras was not something that the Canadiens were willing to meet. It's if they were willing to meet it, they would have met it months ago. And it's not like the price is now suddenly going to go down because they're in a position of need that now that Patrik Laine goes down. So, they weren't going to go out and replace him for a short-term fix. They're not in a short-term frame of mind, even if Patrik Laine was was completely brought in to help the short term. they weren't gonna go out and replace him. So it's good that they found a non-surgical solution to this, on their second or third try, depending on who you believe, and that he's going to be able to be back and actually play, and really for his own frame of mind and for everything that's been said. But for the Canadians, for the players on the team, it's an attainable point of the season where now they can just tell themselves, okay, well, if we can hang around until Christmas and just, I refuse to use the term that the Canadians use, but if they could be in the picture, in the playoff picture by Christmas, and then you get this guy back, then you could try to make a push. And so it's great news. And really, to me, the season lies on way more than what Patrik Laine was going to do. The Canadian season was going to lie on the steps that Caden Gooley took, Uri Slavkovsky took, Kirby Dach took, Nick Suzuki took, Cole Caulfield took. That was going to be always for me the meat of a more competitive Canadians team this year. And it's not now. It's just more so. Now it's just more that those guys are going to have to take this team and get it moving towards where they want to go to a greater extent, maybe, than they did when Patrik Laine was healthy.
Yeah, and when I heard the reactions in the days following the injury, before we knew for how long he'd be gone, the catastrophizing around Laine's injury, oh my God, the season's already down the toilet and whatnot. I mean, let's not forget that Laine was brought in. Yes, he's going to score goals, but I think everybody's aware that it's a gamble. It's a gamble that was worth taking. But it's not as if the aspirations and the end goals of the Montreal Canadiens depend on that player. Not at all. He's there to provide some offense, but also his acquisition was a message sent to the young core saying, okay, we support you. We acknowledge where we are in our development arc, and here's a piece to help you out and give you a push. But the success of the Montreal Canadiens rebuild doesn't lie on Patrik Laine's offense. He was, because up until the end of the season, up until the moment that they said, okay, now we're going to go and make a move, make a trade, and find some more offense to surround our guys, he was not part of the picture. There is a bigger picture that involves the Caulfields, the Goolies, the Suzukis, and whatnot. And it's those players who will determine if that rebuild's a success or not. So, of course, it's bad news that you missed this newly acquired player, this guy who, if stars align, will be able to score you maybe, 30 goals if he was healthier your whole year, or maybe 35, who knows. That's all fair. But he's not the one making the difference ultimately. He's a guy who's there this year. His contract runs out at the end of next year. We'll see if it's a success or not, but he's mainly there to help the other guys getting better. And it's their responsibility, despite the fact that Laine's not there in the first couple of months, to continue getting better. And I think that they're going to, take that challenge and try to run with it, because basically you look at it, it's the same roster as last year. Otherwise, you got a healthy Kirby Dach. And it's a roster that's got plus Dach, minus Jordan Harris, minus
Sean Monahan.
Sean Monahan and early. It's not exactly a footnote, but if you compare, let's say from a later point in the season, it's not a dramatically different roster. So
it's better. I mean, with this roster with Kirby Dach is better than the roster at the end of the season. So it's still better. And don't forget Lane Hutson and Lane Hutson's the possibilities for Lane Hutson. And I don't want to heap too much on him, but I find it funny that the name Laine in French is the word laine. And I find that I've heard it a lot in the Francophone media that he's being called Lane or Len, which is exactly Lane Hutson's name. And it's kind of confusing, but it's, a real potential difference maker for this team offensively is still Lane Hutson. And We'll see how the power play units work. We'll see what happens with his usage. We'll see he's going to struggle. It's not going to be a smooth road, but there's still someone to get excited about on this team that is an unknown, and that's Laine Hutson. And he has proven it at every time he has jumped a level, and people have told him, "You're not going to be able to survive at this level." He has proven them wrong. Based on everything we've seen so far, I have very little doubt he's going to prove those people wrong again. He's going to have difficulties. There's going to be goals scored on the Canadians where you're going to be like, Laine Hutson, that's where he hurts you kind of thing. But I think he's going to more than make up for it at the other end. His brain for the game, his power play ability, it's an exciting thing that I think fans should focus on as opposed to the guy that's not there. Focus on the guy that is there and who's going to start playing these games that count and is going to help them offensively, I think, in a pretty significant way.
But they do get excited about Laine Hutson.
They do, yeah. But I think in the aftermath of the Laine injury,
Hutson,
Yeah, but in the aftermath of the Laine injury, I think that was kind of forgotten a little bit. That this was the excitement was dampened so much based on what I was kind of seeing online and everything. If yes, the possibilities with Laine were great, and they can still be great. If he comes back in January, there's nothing saying he won't score 20 goals between January and April. It's possible. But I am really curious to see Laine Hutson play on a regular basis, more than 2 regular season games, and see, because everyone I think a lot of people, when you deal with a young player, like, how's he going to handle the grind of the NHL season? That's a real concern, legitimate concern. What I'm most curious to see with Laine Hutson is, what is he going to do when he learns the NHL game? When he takes in more information about the NHL game and applies it to what he can do with the puck on his stick, or how he operates. Because we're talking about, remember what Nick Bobrov said the night they drafted him, called him a big brain. That was the first thing he said about him, and that's what he is. He's a big brain. And so, yes, the grind of the NHL season is probably going to be difficult for any rookie, but probably him in particular because of his physical limitations. But that brain, once it takes in a lot more information on where are the vulnerabilities, where are the weaknesses in the NHL game, the pace of it, the rhythm of it, everything, I think he's going to take advantage of those things. And so I think it's a really exciting thing for fans to get behind, which we've already seen. You're right. It's not as if fans aren't excited about him, but I think it's important to remember that there is this really dynamic player, the likes of which the Canadians really haven't had, probably since PK Subban was a rookie. It's an exciting thing to see, and I think he's gonna be impactful in ways that we might not even know right now.
Yeah. And I think that it's funny because during those the first 3 preseason games that he played on average 24 minutes, north of 24 minutes. So there's been no hesitation to send him out there, and
he played on the right.
Show us what you can do. He played on the right side, at least for more than a period with Arbor Jacki. And it looked almost as from the moment that preseason game started, it looked as though the decision was already made that he'd be on that team. And I always kept like a bit of an open mind to the fact that maybe that his defensive lapses might cause them to press pause for a little while. But it has not been that big of an issue. It hasn't been an issue in the corners. I think that he hasn't put himself in too many positions where he would have to fight the puck one-on-one. He's there first, and with his stick, he gets it out. But he hasn't had all that many battles. I think that the one thing that they've realized from the defensive part of his game is probably the fact that his pivoting. He's not so comfortable in back skating, so he'll pivot and skate forward just towards his own net. But sometimes he gets passed by very fast skaters on the outside. So that's an issue. But you look at Logan Mayou's got his own issues, and regular NHLers defensively have their own issues too. So Arbor Xhekaj has got his issues. Justin Barron has his issues. So if you start looking, each guy has their own deficiencies. But you're definitely right to point out that the sum of all that he brings positively will greatly outdo his misuse defensively. So it depends. I'm curious to see how much offense he'll be able to generate 5-on-5. From the looks of it, I think that they'll try to start with Matheson on PP1 and give Laine more of the second unit. So it becomes now, how effective can he bring his game to generate offense at 5-on-5?
Can we address that for a second? Because I know that a lot of people out there are really upset that Laine Hutson is not on PP1.
Yeah.
I think people need to cool it a little bit. Like there's realities in the NHL that you just have to accept. And when you're a rookie who's a bit of an outlier, like Laine Hutson is, giving him everything all at once is not always the right way to go. And I understand. I get it. The way he's looked so far makes him a far better candidate on PP1 than Mike Matheson does. It seems like it. But there's no rush to give him PP1. And I'm sure first of all, if the first power play unit is not working well, Martin St. Louis is gonna make some changes. He's got a solution sitting right there. I liked the line from Marty recently where he said, I'm gonna have to sit the power play coach down and really get in his grill about what's going on. So he said "le parler dans le casque," I think he said in French. So he knows that that's an option, right? But to me, I think he looks at it like we would be so much better off if our second power play unit was actually a viable, dangerous unit. And it's always been working under that assumption. That's why Patrik Laine was on that second unit. People were freaking out that Patrik Laine was on the second unit. But the reality that the Canadiens have been operating under is that whichever unit is going better is going to be PP1 in that game. And so if you're not going well and you're quote unquote PP1, if you're Nick Suzuki and your unit's not working well, you know that the next power play, you're not going out there for the first faceoff. You're going to wait. And the second unit's going to go out there. And so with Laine being hurt, that gets kind of disrupted, right? I don't think they're going to really be able to build a unit that can compete with the first unit quite as well without Laine around. In which case, you might be forced to go back to something that's a little more similar to the way things worked last year. So in that case, then maybe you should put Laine Hutson on PP1 if it becomes obvious that he's a better option there than Mike Matheson. But Mike Matheson is also a hell of an offensive player. Like he took a lot of heat last year for how he played on the power play. I really don't understand it. He was actually really bothered him by the end of the season. Like he was upset about it because he'd seen a lot of it. I would say give the whole situation a chance, and let it play out. And I think Martin St. Louis is aware. But I think he's holding on to that dream that our second unit will be dangerous enough to push the first unit and to give opposing coaches and opposing penalty kills two different looks to have to defend and strategize for. Because he doesn't want, not only does he want the two units to compete, he doesn't want the two units to have the same look to it or the same tactics or the same strategy. He wants to really give opposing teams two different philosophies almost to defend against with the two units. So let's see if he's able to do that. Yeah,
well, without Patrik Laine, I'm not sure if they've got the staff to have two good units. And when your power play is struggling, it's great to dream to have two good units so that they can compete against one another. But the main task is to have a good first unit. Just take care of that first, and then you can look after that if your second unit can do the job. Maybe it would be so much easier if Laine was there because you could spread the wealth around. So I think they might come up short a little bit with PP2. But
It'd be easier if they had scored a single power play goal in the preseason.
That too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but Matheson had 28 points on the power play last year, second best in the Montreal Canadiens. So you cannot necessarily look at him and say he's the one who's responsible. And the way we look at Hutson playing on the power play, he's not a guy who won't shoot the puck very often from the blue line, say, okay, let's hope for a rebound or whatever. His main thing will be to skate with the puck, maybe go down low and crisscross with the guy who's on the half wall. But there's going to need an understanding of how he proceeds, and for him to understand also what the rest of the power play tries to accomplish. It's the good old bring your game into the game type of thing. And I think that if he's because he's so comfortable at carrying the puck and moving down the zone, down low, I think it'll be important that the Canadiens have a good bumper guy ready for a pass from Hutson, who would go down down the zone and then identify a guy who's ready to snipe it. So it's been hard for the Canadiens to find a good bumper guy. So now if they have Hutson on the second power play, they'll need two of them. So
yeah, and the one thing I like about what they're doing on the first power play so far, like the little that we've seen of what Martin St. Louis is thinking, is, again, a lot of people saw kind of the roles being handed out on the first day that they were on the ice and who was where. And, Caulfield was in the right circle and Suzuki was on the left and Slavkovsky was in the bumper and Doc was on the goal line. And I was kind of like, I think I would put Slavkovsky on the goal line. Well, every time power play one has gone out, all those guys have basically been in different spots. Like I think the unit is built to not be the same every time. Caulfield goes from the right to the left circle. Suzuki moves to the right circle. Slavkovsky goes to the goal line. It's Doc moves up into the bumper. And, like last year, the power play really went south when Sean Monahan was traded and you lost that left shot goal line guy.
Yeah.
They were clicking at almost 20% when Sean Monahan got traded. I think they were at 13% the rest of the season or something like that. Like it was, a lot of other things happened too, but still that was kind of one of the catalysts for that. So I like how Martin has an idea in mind to make that unit very flexible and very different every time they go out. And so I think they're going to need time. I mean, listen, it's I think in general, like Marty was basically running the power play last year. I know a lot of people had issues with Alex Burrows as being the power play guy. He was involved, but Marty was heavily involved in what the power play did. Now it's just him. He's publicly in charge. It's one of the several pressure points Marty St. Louis is going to feel this year in terms of producing results, and it's going to be fascinating to see how patient he is with the power play. Now that his name is attached to it, maybe he'll be a little less willing to let things play out, or maybe he'll want some results a little quicker. But already in preseason, the fact that it hasn't scored a single goal, you could see it's wearing on him. He's made a couple of quips about the power play not scoring. So that's TBD, it's the season hasn't even started yet is my point, So if you're really, really angry about Laine Hutson not being on the first power play, let's give it 10 games, see what happens. Just breathe deeply and see how things play out.
Okay, so we spoke about Laine Hutson. What about the rest of the decor? If we look at the way things have played out, you remember Mike Matheson who told you that at the end of last year that training camp would be wild considering the number of defensemen that were destined to go there. Obviously, in the meantime, the team moved Harris and Kovacevic. But still, I mean, there's plenty of rookies that were vying for a spot. I think that Justin Barron had a more than decent camp. Probably his best camp since he joined the Canadiens. There's still a bit of instability in his game. Will cough up the puck a little bit here and there, but I think that there's more stability than what we've seen of him before. So it's really a step in the right direction for him. Being a right-handed guy, it was his spot to lose because the Canadiens are short on the right side, and if they were, if he had an abysmal camp and Logan Mailloux really thrived, then he would have been in danger. But knowing that he's got to go through waivers before being sent down, I think that sort of shielded Barron a little bit. But he, as it turns out, he won't need that security blanket, because his own performances, even if you just compare it to Mailloux, guarantees him in a good spot on the right side, following what we've seen at camp.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of his own play and obviously Mailloux, who I don't think has been bad, but has not stood out, has not grabbed that spot, has not made it. He's not made himself indispensable, and so if it's close, and one of the players is waiver exempt and the other one isn't, that's unfortunately going to be the tiebreaker, right? So it's Barron does have that security, but I think even on merit has shown that he's more deserving of that third pairing right defense role. What I'm intrigued by, that decision by Martin St. Louis to play Laine Hutson on the right, and we'll see if he does it. Well, we'll see if Laine plays on Saturday, but we'll see if he does it again. Could possibly give the Canadiens an avenue to put Caden Gooley back on his natural left side. Now, for the same reasons I don't like having Caden Gooley on the right side, I also don't like having Laine Hutson on the right side, because he should play on his natural side. But it strikes me that when a rookie's playing like his, what was it? I think it was his third preseason game, or second or third, anyhow.
That was
it was his second game. He's in training camp. He's ostensibly trying to make the team, and you're like, here, we're going to throw you into this other situation and see how you do.
Yeah.
And frankly, he did great. It didn't seem to bother him in the least, because his feet are, his skating is kind of herky jerky, but his edge work, his ability to kind of maneuver is highly skillful, and so maybe that is a possibility. But
yeah, but you were saying earlier that the Canadiens should not give him too much all at once. Asking him to play on his opposite side would be a lot to ask, and especially in a situation where they don't need to, because I know for a fact that Caden Gooley, they're perfectly comfortable leaving him on the right side.
Well, they're comfortable with it, but they also realize it's not ideal, and so so I don't know. I don't think he'll play on the right, frankly, but the fact that they're even experimenting with it and seeing what it could look like tells me that they're at least considering it. I think that they would lean towards having him play on the left, but if they can get Caden Gooley back on the left, that would be an ideal scenario. But really, you go back to when Mike Matheson said that, Canadiens training camp is going to be wild for the defense. It really hasn't been that wild. It's not. It's kind of playing out in a way that's not particularly thought-provoking. I think it's pretty clear that, maybe they keep Logan Mailloux as an extra, have him practice and maybe play some games and rotate with Barron, maybe. But, Jaden Struble, to me, has looked far better than Arbor Jacki so far. He was completely the forgotten man in this whole derby. And again, kind of like last season, where Struble was in Laval and no one really thought about him, and he was just there playing and was there playing extremely well, gets called up. Again, no one has any expectations for him, plays extremely well, spends most of the season in Montreal. Now he comes into this camp. No one's talking about him at the beginning of camp, sort of in the background, has played extremely well, is not really, in my eyes so far, is not in the same conversation as Arbor Jackai anymore. Like, I mean, just the way he's played is comforting to a coach.
Yeah.
It's flat out comforting, and the way Jackai has played is less so. And so the wild battles we were going to see on defense that we thought, obviously alleviated by Jordan Harris and Jonathan Kovacevic not being here, but really the more camp has played out, it hasn't really been that wild. It kind of seems to all be falling more or less into place. Lane Hutson, from the moment Pascal Vincent talked about him at rookie camp in the rookie prospect games against the Leafs, every time he talked about Lane Hutson, he was talking like a coach who did not expect to coach this guy. He was literally, all of his answers were geared towards what he will do in the NHL and not what I can do working with him in Laval. And it was obvious. Like, and then every time Marty St. Louis is talking about him, it's how he will do in the NHL. So that took one question mark out of it relatively early in camp. And now you have this, and Barron playing the way he has kind of eliminated that sort of battle with Mailloux or what was going to happen on the right side. And frankly, so far at least, Struble has outplayed Jackai. And so to me, assuming Gouli's ready to go for opening night, Matheson, Gouli, Hudson, Savard, Struble, Barron looks like the sixth defenseman they're going to start the season with. And we'll see how long that lasts. But I don't think I don't know. Do you disagree? Like, it doesn't seem like there's much of a question there.
No, I've got the same six guys as you do. I think that another alleviating factor is the fact that Gouli was not there, so there are more youngsters that were able to get into games. So you didn't have as much the impression that they're playing this guy over this other guy. Hence, this other guy who's not getting the reps doesn't have the same chance. They played Angstrom a lot, for example, and they love what he can do with the puck. So he's got work to do defensively, but he's clearly on their radar. To me, Jackai is a very interesting case. Obviously, there's been the shenanigans of his past two games being ejected in both of them. The retaliation to Cédric Paré. It's interesting because Martin St. Louis seemed to mind more the fact that he decided to jump on Paré after the hit on Laine. He seemed to take more exception to that than to the blindside hit on Stützle. And to me, it should have been the other way around, because you've got a star player who gets injured in the heat of the moment. You won't have a million replays to determine if Paré is really guilty or not. But I mean, he went after him, whereas the other one, it looked like retribution, like a clear case of retaliation. And Jayden Struble explained it very well. We were many guys going after Ridley Gregg for his hit on Doc. We invited him to dance. He said no to multiple guys, and ultimately, what happened is that Jackai said, okay, well, that Struble didn't go that far, but the idea is that at some point Jackai took it upon himself to say, well, if they're going
Struble
after
did go that far. Struble totally did go that far. Well, he said we had 5 or 6 guys go up to him and ask him, and he said no, and then Arbor did what he did. So that's what.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
He made the line, and it's clear what Arbor was. I mean, the fact that Martin came out after the game and was like, that had nothing to do with the hit on Doc, and he said it with a straight face. And I went back.
It was a hockey play.
It was a hockey play, and that he would have done that regardless. Maybe. I didn't really buy it. I don't think anyone in that room bought it. It was just like it's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I made it. I wanted to ask him again and see if he how he reacted. So and he stuck by it. He's like, yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with one. Had anything to do with the other. So it's the reality is that Jackai, his teammates love that. They love that about him, and it's great having a guy on your team who does stuff like that. It's just that you need to do a better job of executing that. It's like it's a very I mean, the Canadians gave up 3 power play goals on that major after the major he took for the hit on Stützle, which, most of the Canadians players didn't agree with it. But the only reason they didn't agree with it is because Arbor missed. Xhekaj missed the hit. He missed doing what he actually wanted to do, which was knock the guy's head off. And if that was a game of consequence, and for a second game in a row, Arbor Xhekaj gets kicked out of the game. The other team gets one time it was a 7-minute power play. The other time it was a 5-minute power play, and you're up 2-0 in the game, and all of a sudden the power play ends and you're down 3-2. That's tough. That's a tough thing to handle. It's not ideal. So,
and in the first of those 2 games, Reinbacher went down, in his first shift. So he gets thrown out of the game. It means that the team finishes the game with 4 defensemen.
Yeah, it means poor Lucas Condotta has to play defense.
Yeah.
So that's a sign you're not making it. That's a sign you're not making the team. By the way, when you're asked to play defense in a preseason game and you're a center, you're like, yeah, that's. I guess I have to do that. Yeah, not making it. I don't think I'm making
even
this team.
even before those 2 games. I mean, Arbor arrived in camp knowing full well that he had this persona, this calling card that everybody knew full well about, that he's an intimidating presence and that he can instill fear in the opponent. So he's got that going for him. But he wanted to come into the season and say, I'm going to stop complicating things defensively. I'm going to I'll avoid taking an extra step when I don't need to, whether it's in rush coverage or in corner battles, and basically just read the game better and make better decisions defensively. So looking around, know where everybody is, both my teammates, my opponents, because he knows that he needs to make strides defensively in order to secure his spot. And ultimately, if he wants to become a top 4 defenseman, he'll need that. Because yes, the Canadians always spoke about his untapped offensive potential because he skates well for a big man. He's got a great slap shot and whatnot. But when you see Mailloux knocking at the door, when you see Hutson who's entering, and Goalie is another guy who's got untapped offensive potential, there's not going to be many opportunities for Xhekaj to showcase this side of him. So if he wants to flourish as a defenseman with the Canadians, it's got to be through his defensive aspect of the game, through the PK, through just being a more prototypical, defensive tough guy. A little bit like Ben Sherratt was early on in his career, before he became, that almost top pairing defenseman during his years in Montreal. I think this is a path that Xhekaj could think of and say, if I can follow those footsteps, that'd be great. But in his first game, you mentioned how he played a period with Hutson. Sure, Hutson played on his offside, and it was a great experiment, a great test to him. But it was also a way to sort of balance the duos, because Xhekaj was struggling during that game. He got burned on many occasions. When the pressure was going towards him, he lost the puck on many occasions. Against Ryan Reeves, against Nick Robertson. It gave a few odd man rushes to the Leafs. So what he wants to accomplish, I'm not sure if so far he's been able to do that. It might have cost him at the beginning of the season a regular spot, because I totally agree, Struble has been a lot more secure, a lot more reliable in his own end, and in all 3 zones for that matter. But the one thing that Xhekaj still has going for him is that the big boss in Montreal is Jeff Gorton, and Jeff Gorton wants a team that's going to be more rugged, harder to play against, with more sandpaper. So it would take a lot for this team to turn their back on Xhekaj, because they want that sort of spirit on their team, and they want to see more guys maybe not throw the gloves and do those the sort of acts that Xhekaj has done, but that team toughness that they talk about, they really want to see more guys showing it. And I think it starts from the top, and Xhekaj is one of those guys. So if you want to be a tougher team, you don't easily get rid of your tougher guy. toughest guy.
Oh, no one's suggesting they're going to get rid of Arbor Jackai, but I mean, I
No.
would I would suggest that their team toughness does not go down with Jaden Struble in the lineup instead of Jackai. It doesn't go down a
Yeah.
lot. And B, it's hard to be a PK guy if you're always in the penalty box. So if you want to establish yourself as a penalty killer, which he said during this camp that he feels he needs to do to solidify his spot in the lineup, you're not going to kill penalties when you're sitting in the box watching the other guys kill the penalty that you just took. So there's a line that needs to be drawn there for Jackai. Let's go to the forwards because we started talking about Laine, and obviously his departure has created a lot of intrigue. This is probably the most intriguing part of the final phase of training camp, where they have another practice today in Mont Tremblant on Friday. Obviously, the game in Ottawa on Saturday. 2 practices next week before they host Toronto in the opener. And over the course of that time, Martin St. Louis has to figure out what he's going to do with his line combination. So this is where we stand. The other day, I guess it was Tuesday morning, Martin St. Louis revealed something. He said that if he can, he would prefer to not touch the first line. So, I wrote a piece saying, maybe putting Slafkovsky with Doc and keeping Suzuki and Caulfield together would be a way to, spread the wealth a little bit. Martin St. Louis, if he can at all avoid it, said, I would rather not touch that first line, which is understandable. They were so good over the second half of the season. It's a very defensible position, but if he can't figure out any other solutions, that's something he has in his back pocket. So for now, that's not an option. So we know, basically, the Canadiens are going to probably start the season with Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and Juraj Slafkovsky on the first line. The second line is where it gets intriguing, because if you don't break up that line, you've just taken like an all-world talent off of Kirby Dach's wing. You want Kirby Dach to have a bounce-back season, and I think in the last game, aside from getting hit with that blindside hit from Ridley Gregg, you kind of saw the old Kirby Dach starting to creep in, especially the fight with Gregg, which was something that he was doing with more frequency a couple of years ago towards the end of the season. So you want to give him some talent, and that's really the crux of it, because the forward situation looks set at the start of camp. Caulfield, Suzuki, Slav, Newhook, Dach, Laine, in whatever order you want to put the rest, but Gallagher, Evans, Armia, and Anderson, Dvorak, and Joshua Roy. So if the first line stays intact, what's the best way to make that second line, to give it some punch and some bite offensively, without undoing all the other things that Martin St. Louis thought he was going to be able to use to start the season?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a single alternative that can produce as many goals as Laine, apart from moving Slafkovsky, for example, or Caulfield. Maybe Josh Anderson could be one guy if he has a bounce back season. It's a bit of an uphill battle for him so far. I mean, Marty said that Anderson looks great since the beginning of camp. He's been very good, and he's taken responsibility and action on the sort of season that he had last year. Is it enough what he's shown at camp to prove that he can play with Dach? I'm not so sure that we're going to see that right from the get-go. But strictly from an offensive perspective, that's probably their best bet. If they hope for a bounce-back season from Anderson, pairing him with Dach is probably the best way that you can generate offense from Anderson. Is it going to be him? I look also at Joshua Roy and Joel Armia as the other two candidates, and the thing is, they provide you with vastly different makeups. Whether you put Armia with Newhook and Dach, or it's sliding in there, the whole line gives you something different. And Armia, there's a lot of attractive parts to what he brings that if you put him with Newhook and Dach, it's interesting, because Newhook is a guy who can be, because of his speed, a very good puck retriever. He's good in the corners, Doc is amazing at transporting the puck, and he's also a good puck distributor, can hold on to the puck. And Armia, we've marveled on many occasions how he was probably the best in the Canadians to protect the puck. So once they gain possession, and they manage to enter the zone, those three guys together, I feel could be a good cycling line for the Canadians, and the sort of line that could sustain possession. With Roy, there's probably a bit more, because he's got also a big brain and he's a guy who's very smart offensively. The other thing is that Armia would probably bring an elevated defensive mind to that line that, for example, Anderson would not. But Roy, I think, would be the sort of guy that would develop a connection with Doc and create things that are a bit more unusual offensively, because they would probably think of the game at the same level. So Roy, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that he will be a second liner in the NHL. The question is, do they see him as being ready at 21 years old in his second pro season to fill that role right away? It's not clear that's what we're going to see, but in the last game against Ottawa, Marty used both Roy and Armia on each of Doc's wings. So it's like, guys, show me both on your side what you can do next to Doc. So maybe that he's open to the experiment.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about Armia too is I think Marty really liked the size of the line with Laine and Doc, and you put Armia there. He's not quite as big as Laine, but plays big, and you still have that same identity to that line in that respect. Obviously, even though Armia has objectively one of the best shots on the team, he's not a shooter per se. He doesn't have a shooting mentality to the same extent that obviously Laine does, or Caulfield does, or he's not a shooter. I'm sure everyone he's ever played with wishes he was a shooter, because you watch him shoot the puck in practice and you tell yourself, man, if this guy just shot the puck more often, he would score more goals. And maybe in that role, he could do that. Doc is more of a pass first guy, and he was talking about how, watching Suzuki last year and watching him take the step of becoming more of a goal scorer when he was always a pass first guy. Doc looked at that and said, that's something I should do. That's something I need to do. Everyone knows they're going to be trying to set up Laine on my wing. If I start shooting the puck more, it makes our line that much more difficult to predict. And so, because the one thing I look at when you put Armia with Doc and Newhook, and even if you put Anderson with Doc and Newhook, who's going to score the goals? Like, it's great to cycle. Someone's got to put the puck, someone has to actually finish the play, right? So, but regardless of the solution that they find, that line is going to need someone to exceed expectations to some extent, and play outside of themselves. It's either Anderson plays there and rekindles what had been up until last year a very consistent 20 to 25 goal scorer in the NHL. That's what he did. He did it pretty much every year he was healthy until last year. So if he can do that again, and I don't see a reason why he can't. I know a lot of people have kind of given up on him because last year went so poorly, but if you go back to the first 20 games of last season, and even go back to what was being written about Anderson in the first 20 games last season, it's like, man, this guy can't catch a break. Oh, he hit another goal post. Oh, he had another breakaway, he couldn't finish. He was getting chance after chance after chance after chance, and nothing was going in. If he gets a few of those in, start the season, then who knows what kind of impact that could have on him. So that would be an example of someone exceeding expectations. Armia suddenly becoming more of a shooter and becoming a bit more of a prolific goal scorer would be him exceeding expectations. And that's kind of the name of the game. When you're replacing a player of Laine's caliber, you have to quote unquote step up. That's what players always say. And so someone's going to have to do that to fill out that line. But the way I look at it is, and I agree with you, it's probably between Anderson and Armia. Newhook will stay there, and one of those two will go. So they are both on separate lines right now. Anderson would have to leave the Dvorak line. Armia would leave the Evans line.
Yeah.
Which line gets hurt more? Which of those lines get hurts more by losing that player? And I actually think it's the Evans line. Like, there's a good kind of chemistry with Armia, Gallagher, and Evans. They'll just look good together and look like they could be like just a highly effective bottom six line that really not only benefit, but kind of eat up some of the matchups they might get lower down the lineup.
It's a quality fourth line.
It's absolutely. And arguably a third line on this team. But if it's not Roy, I should say. So if you have Roy, Dvorak, and Anderson goes up, and this is where Emil Heineman and Oliver Kapanen come in, and the potential of that happening. I thought it was a very good point in your piece this week where you mentioned that the Canadians waited till November, December before they sent Matthias Norlinder back to Sweden, who also had a European assignment clause. That's easily something that we could see happen here with the way Kapanen's performed. I thought Martin St. Louis' answer to a question I asked him about, how do you evaluate a guy in September and project how that guy will do in the grind of January and December? And he was like, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And we have no way of knowing. We just can't know. So Kapanen, I think, has done everything. And even Heineman, I think both of them have done everything in their power to provide a viable replacement for, let's say, a Josh Anderson on a line. Like if you put together a line of Joshua Roy, Christian Dvorak, and let's say Oliver Kapanen.
Yeah, that's what I think was going to happen.
Yeah. And to me, that's a pretty good third line. And you have a righty and a lefty who can take the draws on that line. Yeah. You have Oliver Kapanen's like hockey smarts has been probably his most remarkable trait through training camp. The positioning on the North American ice does not seem to be an issue to him whatsoever, which is shocking, frankly. I mean, he's never played on this surface really for any extended period of time, and he looks like he's played his whole life on this surface.
So seamless, huh? The transition.
So I mean, I don't think, and that's the thing, is like maybe Heineman would fit as an Armia replacement with Evans and Gallagher. He seems to kind of fill out that line well if Armia were to move up to the dock line. But I really think Juan Dvorak and Kapanen is a nice combination to start the season with if you move Anderson up to the dock line with Newhook. And you're not necessarily losing a whole lot. Like, I don't think, other than Laine not being there, obviously. I mean on the Dvorak line, you replace Anderson with Kapanen, he's a completely different player. He doesn't play the same style, but they're both right shots. And Kapanen's just learning how to play the wing. The other night against Ottawa on Saturday night, when Jake Sanderson scored the goal that was called back by an offside challenge, that was a case where Kapanen was bunched back in the slot as a centerman, but he was the winger in that situation. He was not the first man back. He was not the low man, but his center instincts kicked in and he was too far low and gave Sanderson the space to let go of that one-timer. He admitted after the game, and I was kind of like, is that a case of you just not being used to playing on the wing? He's like, yeah, I probably should have been there to block that shot. I was like, that's not what I'm saying. So I was like, I'm not criticizing the fact that you didn't block the shot. I'm like, do you think that once you get more accustomed to being a winger that you would actually be in that spot as opposed to where you were? And he said, yeah, maybe. He didn't really actually like the question, but it's okay.
No kidding.
But it was pretty obvious to me. Like Sanderson had a lot of room. I know I'm starting the relationship off really well, but Sanderson had a lot of room because Kapanen was off of him. But it's normal. Like he hasn't played the wing since he was in junior and even before that. So
yeah.
But
16 years old.
I do think that the excellent camp that both he and Heineman have had really makes not only this problem a little bit less severe, but gives the Canadians a great opportunity to get a real look at both of these guys and really evaluate them in a real NHL environment and have a better idea of what they have in these two players. And so if you want to look for a silver lining, I think that's the silver lining in the whole Patrik Laine injury, is that maybe the Canadians will have the opportunity for one of Kapanen or Heineman, or maybe even both, over the course of the next 2 to 3 months, where they can get a long look at them and kind of have a better idea of what they have in these two prospects.
Yeah, I think the Laine injury, when you count the number of guys, I think it helps more Heineman than Kapanen. I think Kapanen by himself, was finding a spot, just through his play. You mentioned the fact that you could have the face-offs with Dvorak each on their strong side. What I like is that it would enable the Canadians to start that line in the defensive zone, and the fact that he's got such good defensive instincts too would make it a line that would probably not stay like buried in their own end. They give themselves a better chance to win possession out of the draw. And if they do, they could potentially move the puck much nicer, in a nice way out of the zone. We've brought up the fact that Dvorak is not really strong as a transition guy and at carrying the puck, but maybe that's something that Kapanen could do better than he does. So that's interesting, because as much as possible, you don't want your top two lines to take too much of a defensive burden, and you don't want it also to be relying only on Evans to do that. So I think that with Dvorak there and a right-handed centerman playing on his wing next to him, I think that it's great. And the other aspect also regarding Kapanen is that the Canadians are at crossroads when it comes to the PK. They've got Armia, who's on the last year of his contract, Dvorak's on the last year of his contract, and Evans also. Those guys are like the main penalty killers up front for the Canadians. So there is a world where none of those three guys would be with the Canadians next season. So if they want to look in the future, they need to think about, okay, so who are we breeding and developing as our penalty killers of the future? And in that sense, having Kapanen around, who's done some penalty killing in Finland before, and Martin St. Louis said, I see an adept penalty killer in this guy. It's good that they have at least one young guy that they can develop in that role, so that they won't have to start from scratch.
They have two. They have Owen Beck too. They have two young guys that they can develop in that role.
Yeah, but I mean, they would not start in the NHL at the same time, so that's good.
No, I know, but I mean, it's when you look down the road, and that's what the emergence of Kapanen is so interesting, and it's because it looked for a while that it was just Owen Beck, like Owen Beck had that burden alone, and now he clearly doesn't. There's another, and honestly, it's not hard to see a future where these two guys are kind of fighting for the same job. Like they're both right shot centers. They're both going to be known as face-off guys. They're both going to be known as penalty killers. They both have some offense to them. They're both very smart players. There's a lot of similarities between the two. And whereas for a long time it looked like Owen Beck was kind of the future Jake Evans replacement or the future Dvorak replacement or whoever it is, he's not alone in that position anymore. And maybe both of them can make up the bottom six of the Canadians, or the bottom six centers for the Canadians in the future. But they have more than Owen Beck as a two-way center option to replace potentially one of Evans or Dvorak or both at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I would like to add quickly on Heineman, because I thought that he started camp a bit slowly. I thought that he didn't fully grasp the opportunity, but as camp progresses, he's getting better and better, and you're seeing him being a lot more impactful. And if he's put, let's say that they move Armia up, to me, Heineman playing with Evans and Gallagher would provide speed, forecheck, defensive acumen, a lot of tools that keep a fourth line modern and fresh. I think that he can be very serviceable in that role, and he's another guy who could be groomed into a penalty killer. So, a lot to like.
Yeah, and the last game he was, he knew. It's I think it's encouraging when you know what the situation is, and you go out there and you perform. Like you show that I'm aware that there's a spot to be won, and I'm going to show you what I got.
Yeah.
And I think in the first period he went wide on Jake Sanderson, right around him, right in front of the net, put a backhand off the post, but that was a strong, hard move to the net. Drew a holding penalty on that try. Like that was great. That's the kind of stuff he needs to do, like that power forward, skilled stuff. And frankly, when you're talking about Heineman, I mean, if you're looking for, when I mentioned earlier, like Armia is not really a shooter, Anderson's not really a shooter, Heineman's a shooter. If you're looking for a replacement for Laine on the power play, even though he's not a righty, he's a lefty. If you want another shooter for your power play, then Heineman makes a lot of sense because that's the role he played in Laval. He's a shooter. His best attribute is his shot. In that sense, he brings an element that you lost when Laine got hurt.
He could be a good bumper on the second unit.
He could. I mean, he's generally a right circle one-timer guy, but yeah, he could be for sure. I mean, he was one of the better power play guys in Laval last year. Just bombing one-timers. So he has that ace in his sleeve. Not to say that Oliver Kapanen can't play on the power play. He scored. I think he scored 4 power play goals at Kalpa last year in Liga, which was like 3rd or 4th on his team, and Heineman scored 5 in Laval, which was 3rd or 4th in Laval. I don't remember exactly which, but as a pure shooter, he brings an element that second unit lost when Laine went down.
Yeah. So otherwise, Michael Pezzetta will be the 13th forward, so that's pretty clear. Eventually, he'll have competition from Luke Tuck, who's another guy who got better as camp went on. Any disappointment throughout the lineup? The offense, defense guy that you thought you wanted to see more of?
Not really. I thought Beck had a good camp, all things considered. He still hasn't matched the impact he had in his first camp right after being drafted, but I thought he was fine. I guess Mailloux would be the disappointment. I think, and not to say that he had a bad camp. I thought Mailloux would make it more obvious that he belonged in the NHL, and he hasn't done that. He's not a no doubter NHLer right this moment. Like to me, he's a no doubter NHLer at some point. Yeah. But and obviously Jack Eye, which we've gone over, but those would be the guys that I think we should quickly. I don't want to get into a whole thing about the goaltending, but Jacob Dobesh looks like he's a factor here. Like not to make the team, he's not going to make the team, but another good season. Like actually, I shouldn't say another. If he has a full good season in Laval as opposed to the half good season he had last year. He's a factor, man. He's a factor, and I think he's looked the part in camp every time he's gotten an opportunity. I'm not just talking about the game against the Leafs. I'm talking about overall in practices. The guy, the Canes have something with him. So, but
it's funny because one night I opened Twitter and Carey Price was trending. So obviously I went to see why. So there were 2 things. I think it came from Sportsnet. They were putting a list of 4 goalies, and you had to get rid of one of them. There was Fleury, Luongo, Lundqvist, and Price, and you had to boot one out of the island. So I guess the votes that Price got contributed to him trending. But the other thing was all those saves that Dobesh made that drew comparisons to Carey Price. I was like, oh my God, people get carried away. But I can see, I mean, whenever there's a big guy who doesn't move a lot and who's just there, and he wears a Canadiens jersey, of course he'll make you think of Carey Price. But I think that Dobesh, as he grows into his role professionally, is trying to calm down his game, being not as challenging the shots as much and staying a bit further back, because he was challenging a lot when he was in Ohio State. He found some consistency in his game last year, but I think that you're right. If he really builds on that and shows his promises this year in Laval, it'll be an interesting asset for the Canadians. And we've had our lesson first with Charlie Lindgren and not so long ago with Caden Primo, but we're tempted to give up on goalies at an age where you should just wait, stick with it, and see what happens when they're 26, 27. And Montembeault's another guy. I mean, the guy that the Canadians picked up on waivers and the goalie that he is now is two different guys.
Well, this is why I 100% believe they need to change the waiver rules for goaltenders. I mean, Florida Panthers should still have Sam Montembeault, in my opinion. The Canadians shouldn't have had to carry Caden Primo as a third goalie all year last year. I think goaltenders take more time. Waiver rules should be changed and give organizations more time to evaluate their own goaltenders. This is why goaltenders don't get drafted high, because the waiver rules make it so that you have to make an evaluation on them too soon. You're not going to waste a second or second round pick on a goaltender that you might lose on waivers, the way I think the Panthers took Montembeault in the third round, if I'm not mistaken, and gone, asset out the window. So otherwise, I don't know, no huge disappointments. I think even Philip Meshar showed well by the end of camp and showed some promise, where he got kind of off to a bit of a slow start at the rookie tournament and everything. And so, but overall, it's going to be a tough season. The Canadians are in a dog of a division. That hasn't changed. It's going to be tough. They're going to lose some games. It is what it is. So, but I think it's going to be a fun season to follow with so many emerging players who are still on the upward trajectory of their careers, and they're just adding more and more of those guys. And so, from an overall team building standpoint, it's interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting to see some of the things management starts to do as they start to identify the long-term holes that they have in the organization and how they go about filling it. It should be fun. So let's get it started. I'm kind of sick of preseason. I think everyone is. So.
I know everyone is. Speaking of let's get started. So let's just remind our listeners and our viewers that so this is the only episode that we're airing on the SDPN channel this season, because we're going to move to Substack, and you can find us at basuandgodin.com. We are going to start that hopefully next Friday, so after the first two Canadian regular season games. So quick reminder. So on Friday, episodes would be free. Monday episodes will be behind a paywall, but that's only after the first month of the season. So it's going to be Oktoberfest. So we're going to party, free beer for everybody for the first month of the season. You're more familiar with Substack than I am. Can you just give quickly a gist of what it is?
Yeah. So how it's going to work. So if you do subscribe to the podcast, what will happen is for the paid episodes, whatever platform that you listen to the podcast on, you will receive a special link from Substack. Will automatically be emailed to you as soon as you subscribe. And that's your personal subscription link. And you can paste that into whatever, there's a step-by-step instructions that Substack sends you. You paste that into whatever is your preferred platform, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts or what have you. And once you do that one time, as long as you remain a paid subscriber, that paywalled episode will organically just appear in your feed the way it always has. There'll be no real change in that respect. You'll still get it on Apple or whatever platform you prefer. And that's a one-time thing that you have to do. So you do it once, and it'll show up in your feed the way it always has. If you're not a subscriber, then the free episode will show up in your feed the way it always has, but the paid one will not. So that's basically how it works. I mean, it's really a platform meant for primarily journalists to write if they so choose. We're not going to write obviously on this, but it's to produce podcasts, and they do all the distribution to all the major platforms for us. And so yeah, hopefully you give it a look and you can check it out and see if you want to join. But again, as Marc-Antoine just mentioned, for the next few weeks, you get it all for free.
All right, so enjoy the rest of preseason. See you at basuandgodin.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. And all right, we'll talk to you soon.
Basu Godin Notebook. Basu Godin Notebook.